professions. And I'm trying to show how society, media, and technology has shaped our profession. I'm doing this video strictly for public sector communications professionals because of a course that we have coming up on the 27th of August, where we're going to be very, very focused on the public sector context alone. And when I came across this slide, which I was preparing for something else, I just said to myself, I need to share this because I think this slide really shows the reason why we're having this course on the 27th of August. It's going to be online via Zoom between 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. And the whole essence is to focus on the context of strategic communications in the public sector. Now, so let's walk through the history of public relations. And I think the core message that I'm trying to show through this is to show us how our profession has evolved, why the practice is the way it is, not just in the private sector, the differences that we see, public sector, NGO, or development, and other spaces, and to show how history has shaped that, and how as developments have gone on in the world has had to adapt to the way in which society has evolved and how that also affected us as a profession. So let's look at the history of the profession as a whole. And this is history. This is not my view. This is history. You get what I'm saying? Okay, so that's fine. So as we can see, in the late 1800s to 1900s, there was mass production. So it was the industrialization age, by the way. There was mass production, there was urbanization, and there was corporate growth. Of course, this was in the developed world. It's something completely different was happening in Africa, in our part of the world. But then, and so there was a need to manage workers and customers and public trust, and that sort of created there was just a need to communicate a little bit more and to begin to think about how to engage. So this led to the early PR. What happened in this 1920s to the 1940s was a reaction to what had happened in the industrialization age. This was what led to this. Do you understand what I'm saying? So the profession evolved as a response to the industrialization age. So that was the birth of modern public relations as a profession, focus on media relations and public opinion. That was the main thing at the time, nothing more than that. So good. And the next thing was then 1950s to the 1970s, which is around the time I was born, closer to the late 60s, and media, politics, and society began to intersect. And what we then saw happening, the mass media now became a thing. So the boom, the newspapers became very big. Some of us Gen Z may not know that, but then publishing, circulating all over the nation, the country, and and that kind of thing. Radio also became a thing. Local radio, national radio, same thing. TV, local TV, national TV, black and white to color, and all of that. This happened during the Cold War in the western part of the world, civil rights movement in America, the rise of consumerism, that is people mass production, because before industrialization, it wasn't possible to buy things at scale, it wasn't possible to trade at scale, it wasn't possible to sell at scale. But industrialization made all of that possible. And of course, with the blow up of the mass media as well, what that then meant was that you need to communicate. So on one hand, you have goods to sell, you also have mass media to sell it. So it's a natural fit. So the company started using the mass media. So PR was used for policy by government and politicians, but also used as for branding and for social issues. So a lot of communication was going on, but it was mostly PR at the time. But please note what happened here. What happened in 1950 to 1970 was quite significant. Intersection between media and politics and society. Good. So politics. So the people that were using media a lot was politicians and mostly, I would say, industrialists also. Normal people didn't have that much interaction with the media, apart from maybe a very prominent person, announcing a wedding or that kind of thing. Regular people, they consumed the media, but they were not generators of the media. Please keep that in mind as we move further down in history. So by the 1980s to 1990, that became the information age, digital age, whereby people were now having more access to information. It wasn't only information wasn't, was beginning to escape boundaries to some extent. And it was also fueled by technology. So technology, media, society, all of that. So globalization became a thing. That was a buzzword, at that time of the year. I mean, in that decade. I mean, I know that decade very well because my secondary to university was within that decade. That entire decade, 6 years in secondary school, 4 years in the university. So globalization and the 24/7 news cycle was there, and that was like CNN, going round, and it was still very much one way at that time, because at that time CNN can they'll be or BBC, they'll be broadcasting 24/7, but there was no way of responding to them. You literally had to write a letter For them, if they did something, and many times there were a lot of broadcasts that we didn't agree with, but you would have to write to them and they will not read you. They will not read whatever it is you're saying. So there was no internet at this time, please remember. So then it was about relations with the media, and the media was very powerful at this time, because if they want to black out your news, there's nothing you do. It was so difficult to get traction on anything at this time, because they were gatekeepers, and they loved that role. And the politicians loved it, because they could literally use the media to tell any kind of story that they wanted. I mean, you could literally have an earthquake in a particular place, and the media will come and tell you nothing happened. And you that you are, do you understand? There is no way that you that is on ground can say, no, something really funny happened here, and this is what it caused. No, whatever gets pushed out through the media is what everybody hears, is what everybody believes. This was significant for this period. Now, the politicians and governments and the media were working hand in hand by and large. We had investigative journalists, but then it's only some if you have funding that you can be investigating what should not be investigated, or what some people prefer not to be investigated. So there was a lot of gatekeeping in this period, and a lot of governments loved that about this time. Keep this in mind, public sector communicators, please. Now, the internet age now came in the 2000s, the turn of the millennium. Those of us that were born there, 2000, when the year 2000 was coming, was like such a big deal. And they were, I kid you not, everybody that made that made a lot of noise about the year 2000, they were right. Because when I look at the 2000s now, and I look back to the 1990s, there's a big difference. It's like two different planets, if you know what I mean. So Web 1.0, 2.0. So communication now became two-way. So for the first time, the internet now became the mediator between government and the citizens, intermediary between the media. I can remember very well. I remember there was one when bloggers, because it was first bloggers that started before social media. And when the bloggers started, I remember there was a forum, CNN, where Christiana Amanpour was interviewing some of the bloggers then, in I think America, and she was so patronizing in her questioning about, do you think these bloggers, because the traditional journalists were looking at these bloggers that you're not trained, how do you think just because the internet is here? Most of the journalists thought that this was a flash in the pan, it would not go anywhere. Very few of them really, really understood what was coming at them, which is why by the time social media exploded, many of them were caught napping, many newspapers had to die, only a few were able to make the transition. But I want you to think about the impact this is having on this mediation. So in this part of in this decade, media and government had all the power. By the time Citizen Voice emerged through blogs, what happened? Transparency and accountability is on the rise. Because when you say something, if I watch something on BBC and it's not making sense to me, I have eyewitness account that contradicts it. Not only that I will be upset in my sitting room and be smashing the TV screen, I have the opportunity to go onto the internet and comment under your page and say, or write a blog about it and say, this article, blah, 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 this is what it is. By that time, I don't think we hadn't had social media to that extent, but the internet was providing, but then it was all about blogs. Many of us do not even remember that time. The bloggers, we used to call them bloggers now. Hardly anybody uses that word now. But then in the year 2020, 2010 to date, social media and the smartphone age, this was what just changed everything. And once the social media age and smartphone age came in, what was the difference? It's not just about having a 24/7 news cycle. You are now always on, real-time participatory culture. Things happen in Switzerland, we're talking about it in Nigeria. Things happen in Gambia, we're talking about it in Lagos. Things happen anywhere else, we're discussing it as though it's happening in our sitting room. Anyone can publish. Today, as a public official, if you go to an event and you say something that is contradictory, very controversial, and people record it and they post it, before you get into your car, where your orderly is calling you and say, please, Oga, can you open your internet? Something has. Do you understand? Before you are still at the venue, we're already discussing it. In fact, maybe that person's reputation is already destroyed before they leave the venue. Anyone can publish, share, and influence. And it's not about saying we should control social media. You can't. You cannot do it. Because even if you try to gatekeep what is happening within your country, what about the people in diaspora? You can't gatekeep it. So what everybody else is doing is they are making the shift to strategic integrated communication across all touch points to respond to this social media and smartphone age. That's the only way. I want us to understand that everything that happened everywhere with our profession was responding to something that happened in society, in media and technology. Our profession did not arise, did not develop on its own. It did not wake up and say, nobody woke up one day and said, you know what, I think we should have a PR profession. No, it was a response, an adaptative response to a change in society or in media, in technology, and business. In fact, it was business industrialization that started everything before the politicians also came up. And then it now became media, politics, actually business and society intersecting here. And then technology came in and changed the game. Now, this is where public sectors, communicators, I want you to pay attention. In Nigeria, mentally, a lot of our political leaders still think that we are here. They're still in this period of history. How many years back? This is 60 years behind. In their mind, the media is still the mediator. In their minds, they believe that what they say should go. They do not recognize the citizen voice. They do not recognize that news is now, information is now always on, and that there's a participatory culture. So the top down, the defensive, the adversarial, the confrontational, it cannot work. You have to be strategic, you have to be integrated, you have to be communicative, you have to be logical, you have to respond to the expectations and the demands of the citizen voice. And this is, now I want us to look at this. This is a mapping that is, you can see that there's no country that is written per se here. This is an analysis of history. It's an analysis of what has happened. It is not based on, this is a global, a universal template. Everybody is responding to these dynamics in their own way, in some shape or form. Now, if I want to bring this down to Nigeria, we have a population of 200 million. So if even, let's say, the people that have access to internet, I don't have the figures here, but let's also assume only half have access to internet and smartphone, or even a quarter of that. That's at least like 50 million. That's 50 million opinions you have to deal with. And you think you will do it with anything that is less than a strategic approach. But that is why the struggle that we see in public sector communication, that is why everything that we're seeing every day, and to be honest, public sector communicators, I really need to break it to you. Your struggle is showing. And again, so your struggle is showing. The struggle is showing. I know it's not your fault because your political leaders are still stuck here. But on the 27th of August, we're going to be talking about what we can do realistically to help them make that shift. Now, this is my theory. My theory is that it will get to a point in time that even the leaders themselves will start, when they realize that this is not working, everything they've been doing that is with this kind of mindset is not working, they will start requesting more. And I see they're doing, I mean, some of certain things they're doing, they're trying their best. Most of what they've done, to my mind, hasn't really helped to build reputation or nurture trust, because it has been adversarial. It has been them versus us. Rather, it hasn't shifted to that strategic, inclusive battle for the middle ground approach, where you are trying to use logic, messaging, and relationship, performance, behavior, and communications really to build reputation and to garner trust. And these are some of the things we're going to be talking about. And we're going to be showing real life examples of public sector officials who have achieved this. Because even in a country like Nigeria, where, to be honest, there's a lot of that top down communication and just saying some things that don't make sense because you believe that you think that you are still in this period where you can just release something through the newspapers and what people think does not matter. You are not factoring the citizen voice. I mean, I want to give a case in example. There was a situation that happened, a scandal that happened involving, somebody in the presidency at that level in Nigeria, and it was the response, the initial response that came out, that actually escalated that issue, which for me is a colossal. I don't even know what to call it, because it was not really, nobody was really paying much attention. But that explanation, which did not make sense, is what got even the attention, because the implication of what that messaging said now made it was like, oh my goodness, this is even worse than what we thought actually happened. If what you're saying is what happened, the implication of that was even worse. So at the end of the day, we now saw coverage from even international news agencies. It became a much, much bigger issue. And that's what happens when you don't recognize that now people can respond to what you're saying. There's two-way communication, there's citizens' voice. So the reaction of the citizens was what attracted even bigger news agencies to then report on it. So the shift we've seen now, citizen voice is actually driving the conversation for the media that was mediating before. Most of the stories you see today, it's not the media breaking the news. Somebody, when they see a video, when people report, that's when they send news crew. Some they don't even send. They will just give credit to the person. Because how many news crews? You can't, we ourselves, we are the news. It's now a participatory culture. So if you're a public sector communications professional or a leader, you're a consultant, you want to get involved in the political campaigns or whatever, or communications, I would recommend that you come into this course, because we're going to be teaching practical things. We're going to be analyzing, and we're going to be developing showing the concepts and principles that actually work in this age that we're in. And we're already in it. This started since 2010. So we're already 16 years into this age. So it's not going to get easier. It's going to get harder, much more difficult. So the sooner we start getting the skills, the better, because we're already late. For anybody who hasn't, if you have never attended a strategic communications course for public sector communicators specifically, then you are late to the game, because we have this day dedicated for public sector communicators because we recognize that the context is different. I have been studying a lot of public sector communications. I have also been involved in public sector communications on a pro bono level because it's a passion of mine. I've also done political communications pro bono as well. So, and I have done some consulting training for public sector agencies as well. So I do understand the context. I have related with corporates, with communications teams in many of those sectors. I also follow crisis communications very closely in the public sector just to understand the thinking. I analyze the messaging. I have lots of case studies to share. There are also shining lights within the public sector, even in Nigeria and in other parts of Africa. There are cases that we can look at. It is doable. For me, my own, where I stand on this is that at least know what is the best practice. One day you will have the opportunity to use it. So this is not about, oh, this is not going to work in Nigeria. It's already working, because there are people who are doing it. There are public policy officials that I can name at this point who we know they are running things in a strategic way. I will always point to the NCDC, the way they manage communications during COVID. They went with a strategic integrated approach. We've also seen that, in fact, if I look at NAFDAC under Dora Kulu in those days, even without social media, she did something. She her communications was participatory. So a lot of these things we actually have even within Nigeria, people who are doing very well, following the textbook principles, and is working for them. But unfortunately, there are few. So we're going to discuss this on the 27th of August. It's a course you need to enroll and also register and make your payments before time. If there are a number of you, like you have a group discount, 3 or 4 members of your team want to come, send us an email on training@solaabuluassociates.com, and we will give you a discount. We would really love to have you in class, because this session is strictly for you. Again, like I said, a public sector communications professional, policy or political, or you have interest in consulting in all of that, coming. We are going to be, we're not talking anything corporate communications, we're not talking any other thing, but it's for that public sector and policy context. And we put the 3 modules together: public sector, policy, and political, because we know that there's an interface and overlap. If I'm public sector communicators, most of the time you are communicating policy at some level in some way, and there's also a very strong political influence. We're also going to talk about that. How do you manage the political influences, and how do you just keep things ahead of ahead of the water? And we also do some simulation group syndicate exercises, just to test our learning and see what we are doing. For instance, if you are asked to do a campaign to address a misinformation campaign, how are you going to address it? What are you going to do? You understand? It has gone viral on social media. How are you going to correct it? If it is this kind of issue, how do you know what to use? You can't use a press release alone to correct something like misinformation or something that, a perception. That you have to really be strategic. And to be honest, the fact that we have not been able to make this shift is why we are struggling. We are struggling. Public sector communications, you are really struggling. The struggle is real. I feel it. So this is for us. We're going to. I really hope that you'll be able to come into class, and I look forward to having you. So thank you very much for watching, and please share with anyone that you think will benefit. And this is going to be the only course for the year on this topic, live online Zoom course. And please join us from every part of the Africa or the continent that you're on. Doesn't really matter so long as you can. I mean, you are close to our West Africa time, maybe 1 or 2 hours, 2, 3 max, not more than that. I think it will still be able to work. So I look forward to seeing you. Registration closes on the 25th of August. I hope that you can register and enroll before then. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you soon. Thank you.